our communities and cities evolve, so this next panel is very apt. What are the demographic changes that reshape our property markets and how they are transforming the needs of consumers and investors? Our next panel speakers will talk about all of that. Let's welcome to the stage moderator Amy Sowita Lefebvre, former international journalist, ex-Reuters, Dr. Aladin D. Rillo, Senior Economic Advisor, Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia or Area, former Deputy Secretary General for ASEAN Economic Community. We also have Christine Lee, Head of Research, APAC, Knight Frank. And welcome back on stage, Dr. Nigel Lee, Head of Real Estate Intelligence, PropertyGuru Group.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much. We're in the home stretch now, so hopefully we'll have a great discussion on demographic changes in Asia. But just for posterity, let's introduce our panelists again. So we have Dr. Aladin Rillo, a Senior Economic Advisor for ASEAN. Christine Lee, Head of Research for Asia at Knight Frank. Thank you so much. And Nigel Lee, Head of Real Estate Intelligence at PropertyGuru Group. Thanks again, everyone. So we'll be covering a lot of trends today, demographic changes, including aging populations, multi-generational households. But let's start with a very obvious trend, I think something that's top of mind for a lot of us, with aging parents, etc. In many parts of Asia, we are seeing aging populations. And what does that mean for property trends in our region, and specifically in Southeast Asia, as well as in other parts of the region?
Okay, I think I better start since I think that I'm the only senior in the panel here. But I think, Amy, you highlighted the importance of aging population. I think it is a very critical mega trend in the region, and it will continue to become more intense in the coming years, the way I see it. For example, if you look at the evidence, it's a very, very strong evidence that 2/3 of the world's older people are in Asia, in the Pacific. And the number is expected to increase to around 2.5 billion older people by 2050, from around 500 million in 2015. So I think the numbers are there to suggest that this is a very important mega trend. But I think, but the way I see it, this mega trend will definitely change the way we house, the older generation. But beyond that, it is not actually a threat, the way I see it, but it is more of an opportunity, okay, in terms of, for example, how the developers and realtors can rethink, okay, housing as well as elderly care. And for me, there are three possibilities here, the way I see it, One is that in terms of aging population as actually providing an opportunity to look at how this new market will impact on the economy. It is not actually, again, a threat, but something that will provide more opportunities. Okay. Secondly, I think we also look at the aging population in terms of how it can generate a growth cluster, okay, of new opportunities or business opportunities. I'm not only talking here of business opportunity in terms of increase in demand for healthcare. I think beyond that, aging population, the way I see it, will provide opportunity in terms of other sectors, right? For example, the nursing consumer markets for the elderly. Another example here in terms of age-specific requirements or appropriate housing and infrastructure. And also, I think there is also an impact in terms of asset management and wealth. So that's second. Thirdly, we have to also recognize the fact, realtors and developers here, that aging population is going to intensify in the coming years. Therefore, they have to be ready to respond to the changing needs of this aging population. One estimate suggests, for example, that if you look at the size of the aging market, it's quite huge. It's around $3.3 trillion US. And therefore, I think the challenge here for the developers and realtors is to be able how to leverage on that huge market, right? The way I see it, it is important that developers, to be able to become successful in this kind of market, to partner with other investors, just to make sure that they're able to deliver the right products, okay? Not only housing accommodation, but something that would also relate to how we can improve the quality of life of these old people in terms of healthcare, for example. I better stop here.
No, that's a wonderful way to get us into the conversation. And you mentioned there are opportunities, and I fully agree with that. Christine, in terms of the actual opportunities for realtors, what can be done, what more can be done to make cities more livable for our aging populations in Asia? What are you seeing? What are the trends?
Sure. It's a really challenge for not just the realtors and developers, but also for the city planners, because our urban core is actually not designed to house aged population. For instance, most of the public flats probably don't come with elevators, and this will be a huge challenge going forward because most governments will have to retrofit these old buildings. And just to put things in perspective, we are looking at a very fast aging population in Asia Pacific. People are saying, China is growing old before it gets rich. Because if you fast forward to 2080, the population in the United States is actually higher than population in China, which is very scary because of the one-child policy, they basically wiped out 400 million babies. And the Chinese government will have to do something to overcome that. And then they realized, actually, in most of the Southeast Asian nations, China, Japan included, you can see that actually our core centers will have to be redeveloped, retrofitted, and that's going to cost huge amount of budget. And governments are not ready to come up with a solution. And also we have a different family value here. You cannot just build a retirement village somewhere in the suburbs and expect people to move there and fill up. It's not possible because parents still want to be with the children and they want to have the multi-generation living. So when developers will have to think of a product, they have to think of a community where the young supports the old and the old supports the grandchildren.
You hit on a really good point there about cultural norms in Asia, in most Asian countries, right? It's not like in Europe where you can just send your parents packing to a retirement home, they just won't go, and you still have, parents living with their kids for many, many years. But in terms of the livability of cities, I don't think we're there yet in most of our Asian capitals. So Christine, are you seeing, from Knight Frank's point of view, a shift to suburbia once consumers reach a certain age? What's happening there?
This is a very tricky question because I think in Asia we are not really prepared to move to the countryside yet because opportunities are still in the cities. So we are still seeing these rural-urban migrations happening in major part of Asia Pacific. I mean, maybe in Australia, people can actually go back to the farms, have agricultural, jobs, products, and they can still sustain the income. But in many countries, this is not happening. I mean, Southeast Asia, you can see because of the China Plus One strategy, people are moving to cities to look for better opportunities. And that trend is going to continue for the foreseeable future. So we are not going to see people actually moving to bigger homes because it's very affordable in the suburbs. But in the reality is that people will start to cram in smaller and smaller homes, just like Tokyo, just like Hong Kong, South Korea. I mean, we have seen, Asia developing in different phases. And Japan is a very prime example of where Asia is headed.
That's fascinating. Naijio, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah. One of the things that when we were looking at aging population and the impact on the real estate market or residential market is there's always this debate will it cause a housing bust because suddenly all the demand, there's when the people, most of the aging population, as they grow old or move on, there will be a gap between the existing demand. And interestingly, they don't see that in some of the countries. Although in Japan, a lot of people are alluding to that. So if you think about in the Singapore, in the Southeast Asian context here, where we see that, the interesting thing that I observe is that what we are seeing now is there's a reversal. In a way that these parents, which are baby boomers, they have experienced a very significant kind of growth in their assets, over time. And at this point in time, coincidentally, the younger generation are earning quite high income compared to their parents. So with this capital asset wealth and their own income, we see that actually boosts the home prices. It also boosts the demand. So people are buying more homes, maybe smaller homes, but they are buying more. Now the question is, at what point do we see the market to turn, right? When there are more people aging, etc. So that is the first part that remains to be more research that has to be done. The second part is in terms of, I totally agree with what Christine was talking about, city planning. How does it going to impact? I think, Dr. You also talk about that. Now the thing is, when people age, it's not like last time, we retire. Our working life also extends now, right? So there was a book I remember is like, in the future we may live until 100 years old. So what are you going to do with your life, if you live until 100 years old? In other words, we have to work until maybe in the 80s or 90s before we really, say, retire.
I hope not.
And that means that how we travel to work, how we travel to leisure, it can't go very far away. It has to be within that neighborhood. And that's why I think what we're going to see in the future is very self-contained communities coming up. Yeah.
Thank you. That brings me to another question I think is just very related to this. Multi-generational households, it's a very Asian thing to generalize a little bit. There are still, including here in Thailand, actually my neighbors live, 3 generations under one rather large house. But I think it's becoming less and less common, especially as you spoke about that migration from rural to city is happening. But what are you all seeing, in terms of that multi-generational living trend? Is that still something to keep an eye on?
I think it will, in the way I see it, because, again, the Asian value, right, in terms of how family would be intact. But moving forward, I think there's also, the way I see it, some change in terms of from the traditional belief, right? Within Asia, we always think that we have to take care of our parents, the old people. But I think because of the new dynamics happening right now, with urbanization, as you mentioned, with migration, I think the younger people have to work somewhere, and therefore the parents, they can't afford to live with the parents. I think the way you see it, when we talk about the old generation, they will require fewer homes, right? But what I'm seeing here, and then I think there is a strong evidence that suggests here that they will also try to increase demand for living assisted accommodations, right? I think this is very much true in the case of Singapore, right? Where we have all these living assisted models that really would help, the old people to live happily. So I think that's what I'm seeing here, multi-generational housing will still be there, but at the same time, we'll be seeing more living assisted accommodations to be able to adapt to the changing conditions in the economy in terms of urbanization and migration, for example. Yeah.
Maybe I just add, I think the demand is there, but the problem is affordability, because data has shown that none of the Asian cities, that's according to the study by Demographia, none of the Asia Pacific gateway cities are affordable. So the most unaffordable, of course, is Hong Kong, with the price-to-income ratio at 18%, followed by Sydney, Auckland. Singapore is sort of at the bottom at about 5.3. So that's also because the Singapore government has this public housing program that encourages affordable housing options, and the majority of Singaporeans also choose to live in the public flats. Multi-generational flats are useful, especially to boost maybe the birth rate, which is a big problem for declining population. So if the government can actually come up with incentives for such living, it's actually helpful, because most of the young workers nowadays is a dual income, so parents will have to sort of take on that childcare duty as well to look after the grandchildren. So it helps if they can actually help to stay within that similar community, and that will definitely give people more incentive to try for children. So the demand is there, but the problem is how to address that affordability issue. So in the case of China, I read recently there's a phrase about full-time children, because the very high youth unemployment rate of 21%. So some of the children, once they graduated from college, they decided to take on a job that gets salary from the grandparents, like $2,000 from grandma, $2,000 from grandpa, and then $2,000 from parents. And then they start to take care of, the elderly parents. They took on household chores and stuff. So can you imagine if these people get together, get married? So they definitely have to have a multi-generation home. Yeah, and you can't realistically expect every family to have one home, because a lot of the markets actually have to rely on rental homes. So maybe the co-working model or the build-to-rent model can come into the place to actually offer the kind of housing products for this kind of living.
Yeah, maybe I just add on to Christine's point about build-to-rent and also the co-living model. And there's also one mega trend that we observe that is going to contribute to this, the slowly disappearing multi-generational homes. And one of the trends that we saw is there's more and more singles. There are fewer and fewer people getting married. And so what happened is, you have multi-generation. At one point, they will not be in demand. Right? So then that also brings back to the problem. What are we going to do when there's a large growing group of single elderly? And how do we engage them meaningfully? How do they have a meaningful life? And that is very challenging, because the elderly that we are going to see in the future, they come from very diverse background. They have very diverse interests. Unlike, in the baby boomers or pre-baby boomers, they undergo similar kind of life experiences. Now some of them travel more, some of them travel less, some of them are professionals in different ways. So in other words, from a planning perspective, you need to curate an environment for all these different needs, and not to forget that you also have other opposing needs from the young, from the workers, from the Gen Zs. So it's going to be a very complicated situation in the future.
Thank you. Speaking of Gen Zs, I don't want to miss this question out. A lot of studies, many studies show that Gen Z are incredibly concerned, maybe less so in Asia, but definitely in the West, concerned about sustainability. They're living in a world with, cataclysmic climate change. And is this something that property developers are taking into consideration as they build Asian cities for Gen Z in Asia? And what's top of mind for them?
Now, if we look at how people are looking for homes, be it Gen Z or baby boomer, Sustainability, unfortunately, tends to be at the back of, very bottom of the priority.
That's a shame.
And the reason is this. First, I think what Christine was talking about, affordability, that was something missing. So to them, it's like, as long as the pricing is right, I get a house, that comes first. As long as it's accessible, that comes first. If there's green building, it's great, but it's good to have, but not necessary.
So where would sustainability fall or rank, let's say, in terms of priorities when Gen Z is looking to buy or rent a property?
Now, that is a very good question. We do see that the Gen Zs, based on some of our surveys, are more concerned than, say, the baby boomers, Gen X. But it's that the problem lies on the willingness to pay. So once that willingness to pay is overcome, then we will resolve this problem. And that's why when we see about green buildings, the Gen Zs that are buying, they are usually professionals. They have the financial capability to buy. But when it comes to the lower income, more equity constrained, that comes, the choices become more limited. So I think one of the things that we talk about affordability, right, is how do we make affordable but sustainable homes? Yeah.
Dr. Ladin, in terms of ASEAN, I was going to ask you, green spaces. I am certainly an advocate for more green spaces in Bangkok and really happy every time a new park opens. But across the board in ASEAN, is that an important factor for city councils, for local governments, etc.? What are you seeing there?
I think the idea of moving to more green spaces has actually increased over the years. And I think it's very much also related to how people in the region are able to look at sustainability. Because if you look at sustainability, it's not really an old. It's not really old. It's been there for so many years. But I think because of COVID-19, people got more conscious, right, of the importance of incorporating sustainability agenda in everything we do. And in terms of how ASEAN is looking at that, I think we have to also relate that the way I see it in terms of the idea of smart cities development, right? When we talk about having well-planned, compact, or connected cities, I think it's not only an issue of boosting productivity or the competitiveness of the city itself, but I think more than that, for me, smart cities are important because they can improve livability, right? In terms of how the cities, or smart cities, are able to provide, let's say, good living condition, access to services like housing or transport, and in general, in terms of how it can improve or protect the environment. So I think in the context of housing, right, or housing development, I think that is where housing development can contribute in terms of how we can promote sustainability, right? And I'm thinking here in terms of how ideas like sustainable homes, for example, would come in, right? When we talk about sustainable homes, I don't think it's only an issue of addressing the energy efficiency, but more than that, it is an issue of how we can incorporate certain elements, right? In terms of whether we're using the right sustainable materials, right? In terms of whether the right conditions are there to support. So what I'm saying here is that sustainability, which is an important mega trend, along with urbanization, has actually forced different players in the housing market to think more, right? How can we make sure that we're not only building the houses or the accommodation, but make sure that people are able to live comfortably? So when we talk about the new generations, right? I think for me, they're also very much aware of the importance of sustainability, but of course in a different context. But we have to make sure that we provide them the right policy environment, okay, to make sure that all these issues about sustainability and housing development are well understood. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, we've all touched upon affordability, I think, is sort of very top of mind for many buyers and renters. Christine, I want to ask you specifically about Asia's growing middle class and what their purchasing trends are, and rental as well. And also, I'm very curious to know what are the wealthy or ultra wealthy in Asia, pumping for, and what does it mean to be ultra wealthy in Asia these days?
Okay, I think the definition of wealth or wealthy, the wealthy is constantly changing because our housing prices just getting more and more expensive. But as a universal guide, I think anyone who has an investable asset of US $1 million, excluding their primary residence, is considered a high net worth individuals. And I think you talk about the rise of the middle class. And statistics have shown that 80% of all the new entrants to this middle class comes from Asia. And we are going to see more and more number of high net worth individuals and also ultra high net worth individuals, which by definition is anyone who has investable asset of 30 million, excluding primary residences. So we're going to see these numbers growing at 20% CAGR over the next 20 years. And I think this is quite understandable because Asia is still the growth engine of the world. But in terms of their purchasing preferences, definitely their sophistications has risen. So a lot of them are now looking at branded residences. I think there are also quite a number in Thailand. So that's associated with, the hospitality brand, whether it's St. Regis, Ritz-Carlton. If there is a branded residences, it's usually quite sought after because people see the resilience of this kind of product in the market, especially in the market with high volatility. They will be able to withstand the volatility. And there's another trend that the affluent likes to buy resort as a second home. So now we have the rise of the ski resorts. I think I was looking through my social media posts. I think 80–90% of my friends are in Japan right now, and most of them are in Niseko. And I do have quite a number of clients who have been inquiring about buying a ski resort in Niseko, and also they are comparing across the globe where are all these ski resorts. Are they in Switzerland, in France, in other parts of the world? Whether it's a good investment product as well. Yeah.
That's why Niseko's fully booked again this year. That's fascinating. I know that we're almost out of time. I do want to save the closer question, or ask you the closer question, actually. Love to end on a positive note. It's a question to all three of you. What's giving you cause for optimism in Asia when you look at the different changing demographics, whether it's aging population or multi-general households or, our growing middle classes? What's, maybe we'll start from you.
I would think that one of the things that I feel for Asia is the kind of resilience that we observe over the years in terms of the industry performance, but also in terms of the culture, in terms of the people. I find the people extremely resilient towards adversity. I mean, when we look at Bangkok, the kind of, the things that have experienced over the years, from COVID to other things, they have been able to bounce back. We look at the case of Singapore, we look at the case of Malaysia. The people are extremely resilient, creating that kind of vibrant communities. So that is one of the things that I feel that is why, if we look at today's global markets, Southeast Asia as a whole is one of the growth poles in the world. Yeah.
Christine, what about you?
I think it's still the demographic or structural tailwinds in Asia Pacific, like the rise of the middle class. We have high urbanization rate, and the urbanization is continuing to happen in many parts of Asia. And now we still have the China Plus One strategy because people want to build supply chain resilience, and they are building new factories, new manufacturing plants in Southeast Asia. That's why I feel the optimism is in this part of the world, and that will continue for the foreseeable future because you are going to basically drive the housing prices because people continue to come to this part of the world for opportunities.
Great.
Yeah, I think for me it's more of the dynamism of this region. because if you compare us, let's say, Asia across other regions in the world, it's the most dynamic. And one evidence of that is that if you look at Asia, average growth over the last 10 years is around 4.7%, compared to the global average of only 2.7%. So the dynamism is there. The markets are there to be able to dictate, what kind of businesses will be having in the coming years. But I think more importantly, I think it's the ability of the people also to adapt to these changes, right? Two important mega trends, as we mentioned earlier, will be digitalization and sustainability. These are two important mega trends that would really determine how Asia is going to develop over the years. And looking at the current trends, digitalization is everywhere. You have technically savvy young people, good in all these digital platforms. And at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, people are getting more aware of the importance of sustainability. That's why I think the combination of digital transformation and sustainability would really empower this region moving forward. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you all. That was a great discussion. Thanks for sharing some insights with us today.
Thank you.